I don't know how we're gonna make this work once the baby arrives. Money is so tight right now. Katie's morning sickness is out of control. I know she feels miserable right now, but we're fighting so much. I hate it. I wish I could talk to my dad. Why did he have to die so young? I should probably get a checkup scheduled for myself. I know his heart thing was hereditary. I'm so anxious. I haven't been sleeping. My marriage feels like it's on the rocks. Everything feels like it's slipping.
Hey, how's it going?
Me? I'm great.
Hey, what's going on, Eastown community? Clint Dupin. I'm sitting in the multi-purpose room here at Iron Horse Middle School where we meet in person for Eastown on Sunday mornings, and our team just got done tearing down. They do this every single Sunday. They set up, they tear down, and I'll tell you why, because there's a vision, right, for what could be and what we've seen over this past year of people who are connecting and discover community and maybe even a new life in Jesus. And that's why we do what we do. And another thing that is so important to us is our vision night. And we do this every single year. It's an annual event that we consider one of the most important things that we do as an Eastown community. So if you're attending Eastown, we want to invite you to this, but more importantly, if those of you who are being generous to Eastown with your finances, those of you who are volunteering, are leaders, this night is for you. It's on September 25th at 5 p.m. It's going to be a great night. We're going to have good food, good drinks, but more importantly, we're going to kind of recap this past year because we know it's been a crazy year, but we're going to celebrate what God has done. And then the other thing is we're going to look forward to the future, like what is coming? What are those 2 or 3 things that we're going to really be focusing on as an Eastown church and community? I'm going to talk about that. My wife, Michael, will be there. We'll be discussing about the vision of Eastown. Remember, September 25th, mark that in your calendar right now at 5 p.m. It's going to be a great time that we are together. All right, well, welcome to Eastown Online. And just a reminder, and you probably saw this in the Vision Night video, we have made a date change to October 16th at 5 p.m. And we need to know if you're coming or not. So simply just go to our Eastown Church app. You can register there because we're going to have a really nice catered dinner that night. And we want to know that you are coming. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Anyways, my name is Clint Dupin. If this is one of your first times joining us, one of the founders of Eastown Church, and we're so thankful that you have joined us today. So we're going to get into our series in just a few moments, but first, I just want to talk about some things that are getting ready to happen. And in fact, next week, Saturday, is the Run for Education. And this is a way that we actually reach out to our San Ramon community. Now, I know some of you don't live in San Ramon, but we want to be a blessing to the people here in this city. And so what we try to do is we try to support San Ramon School District as much as we can. We know that they're in great need. It's so funny to me, and I learned this kind of the hard way, is like when you look at things on the outside, you think like, oh yeah, everything is going good. But they depend on a lot of the finances that are raised for extracurricular type stuff in the San Ramon School District through the Run for Education. So what we want to do is we want to provide some of that support, not only just provide some of the support, but even be in the community on that Saturday to love on our neighbors. And so we'll have a booth set up there. We will share, and hopefully you're seeing some of the B-roll right now of the years past. It is a lot of fun. Hey, so we need you to sign up. If you want to be a part of this day to love on our community, simply go to our Eastown app, or you can go online, eastown.church, and sign up and register for a time slot there. And we will get back to you and let you know when we would love for you to be there. So that's going to be a lot of fun. If you've never checked in with us here at Eastown, maybe today is the day that you do that. Simply text Eastown to 94000. And again, if this is your first time joining us, thank you for being here. If you've only witnessed us on video or online through streaming, maybe your next step is to visit us in person at 10 a.m. In San Ramon at Iron Horse Middle School. So Let's get started on our series. We are in our 4th week. It's okay to not be okay. And we've talked about this for a few weeks, like this idea, it's okay to not be okay. In fact, the first week, we talked about the majority of time we focus on our physical hygiene rather than our emotional hygiene, don't we? We asked that question, what if we spent as much time dealing with what is going on inside as much time as we do what's going on the outside? How much healthier would we be? How would that change us as individuals? And how would it actually impact those around us? For some of you, how would it impact your children, the next generation? How would it impact your neighbors and your coworkers? A lot of times we can't interact, right, in a healthy way just because of what's happening inside of us. In the second week, if you did not get to watch the second week, remember, you can go back on our YouTube and watch this, or you can listen to it on our podcast as well. It is absolutely amazing what Michael talked about. She talked about doubt, how the enemy has planted that seed of doubt in us from the very beginning of time. And we all face it at one point or another. And she gave some great practical steps for us to say to each other, like, hey, it's okay. I'm not doing okay, especially when it comes to doubt and fear. And then we gave some practical insights and practical steps on actually what does it look like to start defeating that doubt in our life. In the third week, we talked about my kids might not be okay. For those of you with children, I would encourage you to go back and to listen to this talk. It's stuff that Michael and I have applied in our own life with our children. We've learned the hard way. We don't do it right all the time, but we gave some practices that we really believe that will help with our children. And we know that in today's world, in our culture, especially here in the Bay Area, the pressure is high on our children. Whether you're creating that environment in your home, maybe you're not, but it's happening in our school systems, it's happening in sports, it's happening in social media, and they're feeling that pressure. So we want to talk a little bit more about that. But today, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. I don't know if you are dating, if you're married, if you're newly married, if you're divorced, but I think we can all agree that relationships are not easy, are they? So today we want to talk about marriage. Now, I want you to know it's okay to admit that your marriage might not be okay. And I will be the first to admit that sometimes I feel like ours is seasonal, that there's a lot of times where I cause hurt and pain in our marriage. And I have to admit that. I have to talk about that sometimes our marriage just isn't okay. And sometimes we have to get outside help, whether it's counseling or it's mentors that have gone before us to help us. So even if you are not married, I think today you can admit there might be a relationship that is not okay. I believe today's talk can help you regardless in whatever relationship, but today we're going to come at it from the marriage perspective. So you might be in a different relationship that you're facing some struggles in. I think there's going to be some promises and some truths and some practices today that will actually help you. So let's get started. Here at Eastown, we believe that God created and instituted the relationship of marriage between a man and a woman. And we know that that is a good thing, but it is also a hard thing. Now, listen to this. In Genesis chapter 2, it says that God said, it's not good for the man to be alone. I'll make him a helper, a companion. So God formed the dirt of the ground, all the animals of the field, and all the birds of the air. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. Whatever the man called each of the living creatures, that was its name. The man named the cattle, named the birds of the air, named the wild animals, but he didn't find a suitable companion. So this is kind of where we first see the idea of marriage. So he skipped down to verse 25. Therefore, a man leaves his father and mother and embraces his wife. They become one flesh. The two of them, the man and his wife, were naked. Right? Were naked, but they felt no shame. Can you imagine? Like, I know, this would probably disgust a lot of you, but there was a time where there was no shame in running around naked, right? And we see that God in his scripture, in his word, has created a man and a woman for each other, right? To share life together, to work together, to be together, to parent together, right? This is what God intended. But if this is true, that God created marriage, if it was created for something good, then there will always be an enemy of good, won't there? Hey, have you ever had that moment where you're like, things are working out really well, and then all of a sudden you're like, something's going to happen bad, and it does. God created marriage as a desire of a relationship he wanted with us. Isn't that crazy? This is an earthly relationship that God designed in hopes that this would be as close to a relationship that he desired to have with us. So if God created it, I believe the enemy will try to break it up. The enemy will try and discourage you in that relationship. And in fact, listen to this. In fact, the prediction for 2022 is that 50% of marriages will end in divorce this year. This isn't just outside of the church or outside a relationship with God. This is inside as well. It's no different. That is not counting the amount of marriages that are experiencing turmoil in their marriages at this very moment. So maybe for you right now, if I could just get you to the place, is like to take a deep breath, to admit like, you know what? There's some issues. There's some things that are going on with my partner and I in my relationship that is just not okay. Let me pray. God, we just come to you in this moment. Whatever we are experiencing, the person that is watching right now, Lord, I just pray for encouragement, just to listen. And Lord, maybe for them is the biggest step today is to come to the place to verbally, out loud, say, my marriage is not okay. And how do we work on it? In your name, amen. Today is going to be great. I'm going to just give you a few little pointers, and then we're going to end with an amazing story from my good friend Lisa, who is on our Eastown team. And I think it's going to really encourage you. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the 4 choices that will help your marriage. Now, I'm going to talk about something, but there's a little caveat here. If you are in a toxic or an abusive relationship, whether it's dating or marriage, get out. Get out. Like, in no way, shape, or form do I condone that. Maybe your first step is to separate. I'm not saying divorce. I'm saying to separate, to get out of that environment. It would be the same as like if you walked into a room that is full of poison, like I wouldn't want you in that room. I'd want you to get out. Because here's what I know. I know that some people will manipulate you, especially if they're not a Christ follower. They could be a Christ follower or say they're a Christ follower. And they will say certain things to you as like, well, aren't you supposed to forgive me? Or aren't you supposed to be patient? Or aren't you? It's like, there's a difference there. If the issues in your marriage are toxic, if a person continues to cheat on you, if there's an addiction that has created abuse or anything in your marriage, this is an opportunity. This I'm telling you is like, get out of that. So what I'm sharing with you today is, yes, we are all in hard relationships. There's hard relationships, some harder than others, but I want these to be things that can help you in your current situation, not necessarily in a toxic situation. So these are 4 choices that I believe can really help your relationship, especially when it comes to marriage. The first thing is this: choose to expect nothing. This seems impossible. Without knowing it, we place expectations on others, don't we? We see this in almost every relationship that we are in. We do this in the workplace, right? I expect you to help me get where I need to be in my career. We do this as children, right? With our parents. I expect you to give me everything that I want. That's the expectation. We can do this in our friendships. I expect you to agree with me on all things. right? Relationally, politically, when it comes to justice, spirituality. And if you don't, then you know what? I'm going to just move on. We do this in our marriages. We place our expectations on our partner. Usually, those expectations are very emotional and undefined. Now, this is a key thing right here. Many of us have put undue expectations on our spouse, right? And you know this because we say things like, well, she won't do this, or he doesn't ever, or he doesn't do what my dad used to do for my mom. And the list goes on and on and on. He, she, we don't do this, or blah, 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 right? It continues to go on and on. Now, it has to be removed. But we can't because we don't know what it is, right? We don't know what that expectation is because most of the time they are emotional and they're all over the place, right? Those expectations are just scattered everywhere. My boys are into these Orby guns, and I don't know if you've ever seen these Orby guns, but they're weird and crazy. I don't even know how they work. But you put these little, like soft little pellet things into water and they expand, and then you put them into this little like water gun type thing, and you can shoot them and they kind of just blow up on impact. Well, one day we didn't see all of these Orbeez sitting in our kitchen, and we hit the bucket that they were expanding in. I don't even know how to describe it. And they're all over the place. I think we're still finding Orbeez from 4 weeks ago. We had to get the wet dry vac in and like start vacuuming up. But here's the thing. It's like, these are like our emotions and our expectations. It's like they're undefined and they're everywhere, aren't they? Now here's what's a truth. Here's really important. The only way to remove it is to name it and to write it down. That might seem very discouraging to you because you're like, Clint, it's like the Orbeez. They're everywhere. I don't even know where to start. Because when we name it and we write it down, they get smaller and you see what you're actually dealing with. So I want you to do this. I want you to ask yourself these two questions. The first one is this: are the expectations I'm putting on my partner too much? Like, think about that. Could I even live up to the expectations that I'm putting on my spouse? And the second thing would be this, is why are these so important to me? Why are those expectations, those should-haves, right? Why are they so important to you? Sit and think about that for just a moment. Maybe that's your only step out of this message. When we do this, we begin to figure out what is behind these expectations. And until you do this, you will continue to use phrases like he always, she always, he doesn't, she won't, right? Always. When you do this, most of the time, not all of the time, you will find out a couple of different things. Maybe the first one you find out is this: it's kind of just silly. I don't even know where this expectation came from, but it's a little silly. And maybe the second one you find out, it's not even attached to your spouse. This is something that you are bringing into the marriage, that no matter how hard your spouse tries, they will never be able to fulfill it. Let me just pause there. Maybe the expectation that you have put on your spouse has nothing to do with your spouse falling short or anything in their life. It's actually attached to something else that you're not dealing with inside of your own life. I go back to week 1 and think about maybe it's attached to some emotional hygiene stuff that has not been taken care of, some hurt from the past, something your father, your mother, something that didn't happen in your past, some forgiveness issue that needs to be taken care of. And if you follow that cord long enough, you realize it has nothing to do with that person. Because isn't it crazy how many desires we bring into our marriage? Think about this. And desires aren't wrong, but these desires somehow miraculously change into expectations, right? Desires are not bad if we allow them to stay as desires, right? But something happens, doesn't it? They seem to crawl out of that desire box and move into an expectation box, don't they? And no one ever wins with expectations. And in fact, you only get to ground zero, right? A level playing field. You never exceed it because you're always dealing with it and they're everywhere. And so maybe there's some things in your life that you have, man, I have a desire to be like this in our marriage. I have a desire for him or for her to do this, but I'm not going to place that as an expectation. I want you to think about this for just a moment, because a lot of our expectation come from our forming years, don't they? When you were growing up as a child, maybe it was a single parent house, or maybe you had both parents together and they were arguing quite a bit. Like, this is what is hardwired into our brains. Like, you saw mom and dad fight continuously, or maybe you never saw your parents argue, so you have no idea what arguing looks like. You never talked about money, right? Or maybe money was the main thing, whether it was we don't have enough, that was always the message that was sent, or that money was king, that we'll do whatever we can to make more money, right? Maybe career was everything. Maybe you grew up in a household where dad was always gone or mom was always gone because they were always hunting that career, that next spot. Maybe sports was God in your house. Sundays was football all day. We traveled any time to go to our sports. Like, there was never any room for God or church, right? Dad maybe was absent, or mom did everything around the house. These all have a way of making themselves positives or negative expectation in our lives. I want you to read this scripture with me. It says this in Ephesians chapter 5, watch what God does, and then you do it. Like children who learn proper behavior from their parents, mostly what God does is love you. Keep company with him and learn a life of love. Observe how Christ loved us. His love was not cautious, but extravagant. He didn't love in order to get something from us, but to give everything of himself to us. Love like that. Wow. How big a difference would that make in our life? The second thing we choose is to choose to take our frustrations to God. Where do you run when you're frustrated? Have you ever asked yourself the question, where am I running? Will it actually give me the answers or bring me peace? Or what are my escapes? What do I run to try to get away from whatever I'm frustrated with? We tend to take our problems to places that can't help. I remember I was hiking with one of my really good friends in South Dakota, and we came on this trail and we turned the corner, and all of a sudden, we didn't even see this, but a snake jumps up out of nowhere and lunges towards us. You talk about needing to clean my underwear out. This was one of the scariest moments of my entire life. And in fact, I wish I could tell you I was tough enough to stay around. My friend was tough enough to stay around and deal with the snake, because we were bringing a group of high schoolers out there to climb rocks in South Dakota. I took off running. It was a rattlesnake. Thing was huge, right? And I ran back on this path, and I found these two people, and I started telling the story. There's a rattlesnake, and they literally looked at me and they're like, yeah, what do you want me to do? And I was like, oh, wow, not very helpful. But I feel like that's what I do often in my marriage. And maybe you do it as well. It's like you're dealing with this thing, and we take it to people, or we take it to something that cannot help. That's what we do, right? We do with our marriage. We go to things that can't help. Or men, you want to do, listen to this. Men, I think this is really important. I'm sharing something with you right now. And it's hard for men to accept where they struggle in their life. A little bit harder than women, right? It's like, I don't want some other guy telling me how to do my marriage. I don't want some other guy telling me how to do a relationship. You know, the most successful people are the ones with open hands say, hey, listen, I cannot figure this out. I need help, right? So when it comes to your relationships, where do you run first? Do you run to friends? Do you run to the bottle? Is it just yourself? Do you kind of just stuff it down further? Do you run to a coworker? Listen to what Psalm says. The passage here in Psalm says, give your burdens to the Lord. He's telling us, where do you run first? Give your burdens to the Lord, and he will take care of you. He will not permit the godly to slip and to fall. So what if our strategy was this? What if our strategy was actually this? The first thing that we do is take it to God. Now, even if you don't believe in God, this will help you believe in God, because all of these areas that you fall short will be brought to your attention. Now, let me just pause right here. This is what I mean. It's like, even if you struggle with believing in God and that God will help, what if your first step was to take it to God, or for you to go meditate on it, or to you to go just kind of sit in it? What will first, almost always, 100% of the time, will be revealed where you fall short. This is how I would say it's easy to believe in God, because who brought those things to your mind, right? There's something else out there that is going, could it be like you're falling short in these areas? Because before long, you're like, okay, God, thank you. Because when we take it to God, we actually have more grace for our partner. That's what kind of happens in this situation. So just imagine God saying, this is my daughter. When we take these things to God, in my situation, Michael is my daughter. Or maybe for Michael, Clint is my son. I can still remember talking to Michael's dad for permission to marry her. And you talk about looking at Michael differently after talking to the father of this woman and how he views her and how he loves her. Like, our God sees your spouse as his child. And in fact, you can't even fathom how much he loves your spouse. And when we get that perspective, when we take it to God and we sense that perspective, it actually calms us down a little bit. And then this is a second thing I would do. I would run it by a trusted friend. Now, I'm not saying every little issue, but I would take it before God, say, this is what I'm feeling, take it to a trusted friend. Now, what is a trusted friend is? This is a person that believes the best of both of you, that wants to be a part of bringing out the best version of you. That I would really encourage you to find somebody that loves God, that loves Jesus. And when you run it by them, like I've had people literally say, hey, I think God is asking me to divorce my partner. I'm like, let's talk, right? Let's talk. And in some situations, yeah, I can see that. But in other situations, like in no way, shape, or form did you get that idea from God. Find a trusted friend that you can bring some of these things before them. And the last thing is this. Bring it to your partner. Bring it to a partner. It's like, can you imagine what would happen in your marriage if this was your new strategy, right? Remember, in marriage, the goal is not being right. The goal is a relationship, right? That goes for any relationship. The goal is not being right. The goal is about to build that relationship. Let's move to the third one. Choose to believe the best. Here's a question for you. When your significant other does something like not listen, forget to pick up the kids, I've done all of these, leaves a mess in the kitchen, still have done that, or in the bathroom, done that one too, right? What is your first thought, right? What comes immediately to your brain when your significant other makes a major mistake or a minor mistake? Do you believe the best or do you assume the worst? Because we have a choice. Isn't that crazy? We have a choice. Before we assume that they did this on purpose, you have another option. You can choose to believe the best until proven otherwise. Now, I know for Michael and I, this was really hard, especially in our beginning years of marriage, especially with me. There's a lot of times where I know she really struggled to believe the best because I fell short. I still fall short. But it's amazing how trust begins to build. Trust begins to spiral in your relationship in a good way when you start believing the best about one another. But our world teaches us to believe the worst, right? Or assume the worst. It's a choice every single time. Here's a little hack for you to learn how to believe the best. The more time, quality time you spend together, the more you believe the best about each other. Now, one of the things that we started in our marriage that was given to us, a little hack that I thought was a game changer, and especially when our kids were in diapers, is like we were working our tails off. Both of us were full time. We were coming home. Actually, at one time we had 4 kids in the house at the same time. So it was constant. We created this thing called a buffer time right? And it was when we would both be at home at the same time. One of us would get home and work, and we would go to a place, whether it was the bedroom. Now, I know some of you are thinking, buffer time, I like that. Well, it wasn't that. Or we would go to a place, right? We would even go out maybe for 20, 30 minutes to a place, a coffee shop right around the corner. And we would just kind of debrief the day, right? 15, 20, 30 minutes. And we would just talk and debrief the day. You know what that did? That gave us grace for each other. I didn't know you experienced that day. And in fact, this is something we need to start again in our home because it was so beneficial. Create that time. Call it anything you want. Call it couch time. Call it buffer time. Steal ours, whatever you want to do. The last thing is this: choose to be in community. Now, this has been our spiritual, maybe you didn't know this has been our spiritual practice this month, is get yourself surrounded by a community that will encourage you and help you grow. And you have to choose that. When you are going through it, who is around you matters. Isn't that crazy? It's like I always tell my kids this, is like, man, show me your friends and I'll tell you your future, right? Show me your friends, I'll tell you the choices you're going to make. Now, I'm not saying alienate yourself from people that are not like-minded and not believers. Jesus didn't do that, right? But he also had his community that would be there to support and to encourage him. You need that community, right? It's like driving a fast car up a mountain road or down a mountain road that has guardrails. Those guardrails are to keep you safe and to keep you aligned with the road just in case something happens. Others around you, whether it's married couples or individuals, act as those guardrails. They are there to speak truth. Sometimes that truth is hard to swallow, but you've been in community with these people and you know they believe the best. They want to encourage you through their stories or just to speak something that helps you get through that week. I can't imagine where Michael and I would be if we didn't have our community around us. Listen to Hebrews, this author, what he says, let us think of ways to motivate one another and others to act of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Here's how you know that you have the right community around you. What they say resembles the heart of God, right? Truth resonates, doesn't it? I don't care if you believe in God or not. When someone speaks truth, it resonates in your heart. And one thing I am not saying is that these are the only people that you are around. But this is why I believe so much in the church, right? When the church is functioning properly, there's a community there that helps align and encourage you. I want to share Lisa's story with you. And I had a chance to sit down with Lisa this week and interview her over Zoom. And I want to say this, not all stories work out like how we wanted them to work. So I had a chance to sit and talk to Lisa and ask her a little bit about her marriage. So I want you to listen to this story. Lisa, welcome to the Clint Dupin Show. It's so great to have you here. I'm just kidding. But Lisa, thank you for joining me.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And this is kind of a weird occasion because people online have never met you, have never seen you, and they would only know you if you're in person. So I know some people who are not in person today are seeing this online. But if you don't know Lisa yet, Lisa is a major gift to Eastown. She creates a lot of our content when it comes to our service and our program. An amazingly talented singer and worship leader. So thank you for spending some time with me today.
Hey, my pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm on my fourth cup of coffee, so I'm raring to go here.
Yeah, well, we're talking about it's okay to not be okay and talk about addictions next week. So we'll hit that.
Yeah.
It's time. Lisa, it's time to be honest with yourself. All right. Hey, so we're talking about marriage today, and your story is pretty incredible. But before we start that, just give us like a little glimpse of who you are.
Yeah. Well, I am married to Eddie. We've been married for about 3.5 years. We have twin sons that just turned 1 in September.
Eddie is a smoke show. Am I right?
He is a smoke show. I feel comfortable with you saying that because I've already said it. So
I read that on your gram, Lisa.
I
That's
know.
Instagram. And I'd never heard that term before, but I've gotten Michael to use it for me.
I'm
She
so
doesn't.
happy for her. I'm
She
sorry.
doesn't. Yeah, she doesn't.
Yeah, we weren't really sure we even wanted to have kids. And then apparently God has a real funny sense of humor. So we had two at once. They do not run in our family, to save you that question. But they have brought great joy to our lives and we're pretty happy together. But that wasn't always the case in my life leading up to my marriage to Eddie.
So talk a little bit more about that piece of it.
Yeah. So I was married before. I got married in my 20s. And I grew up in a strong Christian home. My parents have been married for over 40 years. And I really went into it believing that if you trusted God enough and you really committed, then you would be married, until death do us part. And I feel like that's what people do. But it only took me about 6 months to realize that this was not going to be like what I expected. It was a lot harder than what I had imagined or pictured. Even though you hear, marriage is hard, this was hard in a different way. And I was on staff at a large church. I was in a really visible role. And I was really terrified to tell anybody that we were really struggling. I spent a lot of years just smiling and telling people, things are great. I'm okay. We're okay. Marriage is great. But that was not the case. He and I tried counseling for many years, off and on. We saw different counselors. We read marriage books. We did. I felt like I initiated us doing all of the things in order to try to fix it. And I hope that something that would change. And I would lay in bed at night. I sometimes just feeling like physically like walls were closing in on me. It was really the closest I ever came to experiencing true anxiety. Feeling like sometimes I was unable to breathe, just feeling really trapped. And I felt like I couldn't see a way out. My marriage was not honoring to God, but I didn't feel like I could leave either. I couldn't get a divorce. I was afraid of losing my career in ministry. There's a verse in Psalm 18 that says that the cords of death entangled me. And that sounds so like dramatic, but that at times felt like I'm the cords of death are entangling me. And sometimes I felt like death would be a better option. That's the level of trapped and fearful that I felt. And I remember vividly one night, God bringing another verse to mind, actually also from Psalm 18, saying that he brought me into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. And so I just clung to that image. I would almost picture myself in a spacious place sometimes, in those times when I felt just so trapped. And then eventually, after days and months and years, we were married for 4 years. Actually, I came to the realization I couldn't do it anymore. There was a level of unhealthiness and toxicity in our marriage that I could not overcome. And these were not the issues of he leaves his underwear on the floor, he watches too much sports. It was ongoing, unrepentant patterns of behavior, and I knew I had to leave. And honestly, looking back, it took me a long time to realize that there was abuse, not physical, but there was abusive behaviors happening. And that was hard for me to come to terms with, because I saw myself as someone really independent and strong, and I would never be that woman in that kind of a relationship. But looking back, that's definitely what it was. And because I was serving on a church staff, as I was making this decision to get a divorce, I remember thinking to myself too, like, I don't really know what God thinks about this, but I'll have to deal with him later, because I was just reached this point of I don't know how to keep functioning. And so I walked through a process with the church staff and with the elders, and they affirmed, that I should stay in ministry. There wasn't anything disqualifying that had happened in our marriage. But I wrestled still with a lot of guilt and a lot of self-blame. I do still believe in the sacredness of marriage. I believe that God intends for it to last for a lifetime. And I believe that God can heal any marriage. I think that I know I've watched him do that for other people at various times in my life. And I wanted that so desperately to be my story. And I think that's part of being the not okay, is when God can do something, but he doesn't show up in the way that you think he should have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, there's so many questions that I have, and we can talk about them later or whatever. I know we don't have a ton of time, but just imagining being able to carry on your job and function like in a somewhat normal way, and probably in an environment where people expect you to have everything together. That's a whole different, time we can talk about that stuff. But what would you say right now to people that are in a difficult relationship, difficult marriage right now?
Yeah. The number one thing would be get into community. Like, get in the community, have people that you are sharing what is really going on, that you trust, that are godly. Get a good counselor. If it doesn't work out, try another counselor. Sometimes it's not a good fit and you got to keep working to try to find that. I think that's one thing I look back and I wish that we would have been honest sooner. I don't know that it would have changed anything, but it might have provided just a sense of not being as alone as I felt like I was for such a long time. And so, maybe you guys see a counselor together. You should see one separately. Truly, I think everybody should be in counseling. But be as honest as you can with people that you trust, because nothing will heal itself in darkness.
Yeah, that's so good. And I would just, I'm not trying to take over this interview, but it's like it's so weird to me that there's still this thing with counseling that's taboo to certain people. And I was just listening to, even yesterday, a prominent speaker in the church talk about, no, we've never been, and almost in a proud way, never been to marriage counseling. And I'm like, well, good for you, right? And that's not what I meant to say, sorry. But I'm just like,
well, and if you tell people that you are in counseling, almost like, oh, is everything okay? And it's
right.
like, no, we just need help. We need people to, help us have conversations sometimes. And so maybe things aren't okay, and that's fine. But sometimes you go as almost like a precaution or preventative, healthcare. Mm-hmm.
And it's, to me, is there's not a more important relationship here, right? And a harder relationship here on earth. And we're okay with counselors in every area of our life, right? Except for the hardest area. Mm-hmm. Whether it's sports, it's our job, it's even with kids. Like, we have teachers, we have coaches, we have all those. Anywho, so obviously you can't talk to every single person, but what would it be that you wish people knew about divorce?
Yeah. I've heard people say things really flippantly, like, oh, they took the easy way out. They got a divorce. And from experience,
you heard this about,
not to me, but I've heard people say that about, people, it's like, oh, the state of marriage in our country, they're just taking the easy way out. And to be sure, there are people that are treating marriage, really lightly. And we see celebrities getting married for 3 days and getting divorced. Like, I get that. But I would venture to guess that for most people, no one feels like they're taking the easy way out. It was incredibly difficult to make that decision, to be prepared for massive amounts of fallout in my life that, thank God, didn't happen. My church community stood by me, like there was no, but I didn't know what was going to happen. And so it's just not the easy way out. People are arriving that after, it's a painful decision to come to, and they do it after a lot of thought and prayer and, probably work too. And one thing, this is just so seared in my brain, is like, because I was in a public role at a church, I knew that people were hearing about it, but nobody was saying anything to me. And I think people don't know, oh, well, I don't know what I should say or whatever. But I just remember this one guy coming up to me and just saying, hey, I heard about what's going on with you guys. I just want you to know that I'm praying for you and we love you and we're with you. And he wasn't a total stranger, so that would have been weird. Don't walk up to a total stranger and say that. But I just remember thinking, I always want to be somebody who moves toward people in pain than someone who doesn't. Because even if I don't have the right words, just saying like, I see you and I know this is hard, because I felt almost like radioactive, like nobody wants to talk about it or say anything. And it's the biggest thing going on in my life. And I get that it's not like casual dinner table conversation, but just saying, I see you and we love you and I'm praying, was like huge for me.
Wow. Yeah, you think about the church that Jesus intended to create was almost like, I've heard some people describe it as triage center or emergency room. And it's like, something has changed, over the centuries with the church, where it's like, everyone's welcome, but you need to be cleaned up. Everybody, it's okay to not be okay. We're in that series, but we need you to be okay. Because I got enough junk to deal with on my own. And your issue that you're walking through, your pain that you're walking through, I just don't. Yeah. I keep asking every time you talk, I was like, oh, I want to talk more about that. But creating a space and a place in a community, I love that you said that earlier. Surround yourself with a community, right? That really loves you unconditionally and is almost like, it's like those are the guardrails, right? It's like they're the ones that are going to protect you from going off the deep end or saying, hey, that's not who you are. I love that.
Well, and they're the ones who would tell you, you know what, you need to try another counselor, you need to do another thing, or
Yeah.
they're going to tell you, hey, we've watched this for years now, you've really done everything that you can do. And so ultimately no one can really decide that except for yourself, but having those people affirm what they're seeing, because sometimes you start to feel like a crazy person, like maybe I haven't tried everything, maybe I should, and you look back and they're able to affirm, nope, you actually did, you tried all the
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah. So I know that some people are watching this that are single. I know we have a lot of people in our community that are single. What would you say to them?
Yeah. Same thing about community. Get into community. And if you're single and you want to be married, that's a really worthy desire. But if you are going to date, don't do it in isolation. I really did that the first time, unintentionally. It wasn't intentional. It was just kind of like my life circumstances had moved in a way that I was like in the process of, changing friend groups. And I look back on that as just a huge mistake that nobody who knew me well was getting to know him. And I think I could have avoided a lot of pain and suffering if people around me, if I had people around me that knew me well. And ask those people, invite them into the process, say, what do you think about this person? Do you think I'm acting like myself around them? Do you think that they bring the best out of me? Lean into that. And then, deciding to date again after getting divorced was a big decision. And I had to really wrestle with, do I need a relationship? Do I want a relationship? And both Eddie and I, came to the table going, I don't need a relationship, but it would be great if there was one. And ultimately we decided we think we're better together than we are apart. And so we had to come at it from a place of, I don't need this, but it would be a great blessing if God provided it for me. And I think that's the healthiest way to enter a relationship, divorced or not. And so I feel like we both entered into it in a very different place than maybe we would have in our 20s, or we did in our 20s. Yeah.
That's so good. So let me ask you one last question, then we'll be done. Is if you could go, I know hindsight is 2020, but if you could go back, would you do anything differently?
I mean, sure, 1,000 things, I guess. But primarily, I think the isolation thing is big. I mean, and this is not just a plug for a community, but also it is, because I think that I could have saved myself some heartache. I remember one friend towards the very end, I think we had actually already gotten engaged, just expressing a little bit of hesitation, but because she'd come in kind of late into the process, I was like, this ship has sailed. We're down, we're engaged, we're doing this. And then telling people sooner that we were struggling. It was an issue for my ex to be transparent about where we were. And I wished I would have pushed back on that, because ultimately, not sharing anything, I think hurt us in the long run. And so, and again, use wisdom with that. Don't just blast it on, I'm not encouraging you to make your status update on Facebook, like blah, 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 this is what's going on, but like be in a life group, be in community, and share with those people and have them praying for you and speak truth. And so, yeah, that'll be my one big thing I'd change. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good. It's like, even with our teenage kids, like you see a person for who they really are when they're in, not just with you alone, but when they're around other people. And those other people, like you've already said, are seeing stuff that you might be missing.
Yeah. Well, and I was dragging Eddie to friend things, like on our second date. I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm going to other people to verify that this guy is the real deal. And
Eddie had to pay for somebody else's mistakes.
That's right. Oh, in more ways than one, for sure. But he was meeting my friends so soon, and they loved him. And one of the things I'll never forget, one of my friends from my previous life where I was married before said, you're just so at ease around him. And that was just like such a compliment, that they could see that I was relaxed, that I was being myself. And, I think there was no higher compliment for me at that time. And for Eddie to go, okay, this is a really good match.
Wow. So. Lisa, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. I'm excited for people to hear this story. I think there's there's probably been so much healing. Obviously it's been experienced in your life, but I know it's been experienced in other people's lives because you've been so out front with this. And honoring too. It's like you're very honoring of everybody involved in this story. So thank you so much for being vulnerable.
My pleasure. Thanks, Clint.
All right. I just want to say, Lisa, thank you for sharing that story. I know that takes guts. It really does. And I know for some of you that are watching today, you're ready to give up. You're ready to call it quits. And I love Lisa's story because there's hope in Lisa's story. There's always future opportunity in the kingdom of God. And I want to just challenge you and invite you to something right now. If you are in that place in your marriage, in your relationship, I want you to reach out to me. I'm going to give you my email, clint@eastown.church. We would love to set up, Michael and I would love to set up a conversation with you, have a talk with you, have a coffee with you, and talk a little bit more about that. If you need that help, maybe for some of you, it's time to surrender your life and to take one of these steps, to one of these choices and start applying it in your life and watch how it is a game changer. A game changer. I promise you that. Hey, thanks for being with us today. Next week, we're closing our series, and we have a special guest. I'm really excited to have her. And she's going to be talking about anxiety. It's going to be a lot of good information. And she's kind of a professional in that area. So, hey, again, thank you for your generosity here at Eastown. Remember, you can simply give to Eastown by going to eastown.church/give, or simply get on our Eastown Church app and start your giving generosity journey today. Hey, God bless you, and we will see you next week.